I married a man everyone believed was a self-made millionaire, the kind who never posted his cars on social media, never wore loud designer logos, never tried to impress anyone in the room yet somehow always owned it. And when I first met Daniel at a mutual friend's engagement dinner in downtown Chicago, he introduced himself simply as a consultant, smiling in that calm, unreadable way that made you feel like he was observing more than speaking. And I remember thinking he was either incredibly confident or incredibly careful. Over the next few months he took me on modest dates, quiet restaurants, long walks by the lake, coffee shops where we sat for hours talking about childhood memories and future dreams, and nothing about him screamed wealth. Yet subtle details betrayed him, the way waiters greeted him by name at places that required reservations weeks in advance, the way he never checked price tags, the way he spoke casually about the firm without ever saying what the firm was. And I won't lie, I Googled him after our third date, discovering that his last name was attached to a real estate group that owned half a dozen commercial buildings across the Midwest, old money, generational wealth, the kind that doesn't need to brag because it built the city quietly over decades. Still, Daniel insisted on splitting bills, on driving a simple black sedan instead of something flashy, on keeping conversations about finances abstract, and whenever I gently teased him about being mysterious he would just say, "Money complicates things," and change the subject, which might have bothered another woman, but I understood, because 3 months before I met him my grandfather had passed away and left me something I hadn't told a single soul about. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not even my closest cousin. He left me a portfolio of land investments, energy shares, and private equity stakes that totaled more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, and I had signed confidentiality agreements with lawyers who advised me to stay quiet for at least a year while everything transferred legally. So when Daniel avoided discussing his wealth, I almost felt relieved, as if we were both choosing to meet as ordinary people in an extraordinary situation. Our relationship deepened quickly, built not on expensive gifts but on shared routines, Sunday grocery runs, late-night debates about politics and philosophy, spontaneous road trips where we sang badly to old songs. And for a while I forgot about money entirely, until small questions began slipping into conversation, subtle but intentional, like when he asked one evening while we cooked pasta in my apartment, if everything disappeared tomorrow, savings, investments, family support, would you still want the same life? And I laughed, thinking it was hypothetical, replying that I'd be fine as long as I could work and pay rent somewhere small, and he watched my face carefully as I spoke, nodding slowly as if checking something off an invisible list. A few weeks later he pretended to receive a stressful phone call, stepping onto my balcony and returning with a tight jaw, saying there had been complications with the family company, that liquidity was tighter than expected, that he might need to downsize temporarily, and I hugged him without hesitation, offering to cover dinners for a while, even suggesting we postpone a planned vacation. And he thanked me but studied me in a way that made my skin prickle, not suspicious exactly, just analytical. Then came the night everything shifted. I had gone to his place to surprise him with takeout after work, and he wasn't home yet, so I waited in his study, something I rarely did, and his laptop buzzed with a notification, lighting up the screen with a spreadsheet preview titled Asset Protection Evaluation, Personal Relationship Variables, and my name was clearly visible in one column. My heart pounding as I told myself not to snoop, but curiosity and fear outweighed politeness, so I opened it, finding detailed notes, reaction to financial stress simulation, supportive, spending habits, moderate, no luxury dependency, response to hypothetical bankruptcy, stable effect, and each entry dated meticulously over the past 6 months, as if I were part of an experiment rather than a partnership, and I felt heat rush to my face, anger mixing with humiliation because I realized the phone call on the balcony had likely been staged, the questions carefully crafted, the modest dates perhaps strategic rather than sincere. I closed the laptop before he returned, pretending nothing had happened, because instead of confronting him immediately I needed time to think, and in that quiet space I acknowledged something uncomfortable. I had been conducting my own silent evaluation too, not through spreadsheets but through observation, watching how he treated waitstaff, whether he respected my career ambitions, whether he showed kindness when no one was looking, and I had withheld my inheritance intentionally, telling myself I wanted to be loved for myself, not my assets. So was I truly different from him, or just less organized about it? When he proposed 3 months later on a secluded beach at sunset with a simple band and no photographers, saying, "I want someone who loves me, not my last name," I almost laughed at the irony but instead said yes, because despite the calculation I sensed in him, I loved the man who stayed up with me when I had migraines, who listened when I spoke about my childhood insecurities, who remembered the exact way I took my tea. During our engagement, his testing intensified subtly, more questions about lifestyle expectations, more comments about prenuptial agreements framed as family tradition, and I agreed to sign one without protest, knowing full well my own lawyers had prepared documents that protected my inheritance in ways he couldn't imagine. And sometimes late at night I wondered whether marriage built on mutual caution could ever feel fully safe. The truth finally surfaced on our wedding night, after the guests had left and the music faded, when we stood alone in the quiet suite, overlooking the city lights, and he took off his jacket, exhaling deeply before saying, "There's something I need to admit, I haven't been completely honest," and I felt strangely calm because I had rehearsed this moment in my mind. And he confessed that he had downplayed his wealth deliberately, that his family had seen too many relationships collapse under the weight of opportunists, that he needed to be certain I loved him independent of financial security, and he apologized for the methods, but not the intention, insisting he believed caution was necessary. And when he finished I let silence stretch between us before replying, "I understand," which surprised him, and then I told him about my grandfather, about the portfolio, about the lawyers and the confidentiality, about how I too had chosen secrecy as a shield, and as comprehension dawned across his face the color drained slightly, because suddenly the power dynamic he had carefully managed no longer tilted in his favor, and I watched conflicting emotions flicker in his eyes, shock, curiosity, perhaps even admiration, before he asked quietly, "So you were testing me too?" And I nodded, explaining that I wanted to know whether he valued my independence, whether he would respect me without knowing I brought comparable assets into the marriage, and for a long moment neither of us spoke, standing there like two chess players who had simultaneously revealed their hidden strategies, realizing the board had always been level. In the weeks that followed we had long, uncomfortable conversations about trust, about fear, about the stories we'd inherited from our families regarding money and betrayal, and I learned that his parents' divorce had been vicious and public, fueled by accusations of gold digging and asset manipulation, while he learned that my grandfather had warned me repeatedly never to let wealth define my relationships, and slowly we began dismantling the defensive structures we'd built, merging financial disclosures with surprising transparency, laughing awkwardly at the absurdity of our mutual espionage. And though some friends would probably say our marriage began with deception, I see it differently now. It began with two guarded people trying to protect their hearts the only way they knew how, through strategy instead of vulnerability. Even so, I sometimes replay those early months and wonder what might have happened if I had confronted him the night I saw the spreadsheet, if we could have skipped the layers of performance and reached honesty sooner, and he admits he wonders the same, because while our love survived the revelation, something subtle shifted the day we realized we had both been measuring each other, a reminder that even intelligent, capable adults can let fear script their actions. Today our finances are jointly managed with complete disclosure, our investments discussed openly over dinner rather than hidden in password-protected files, and when hypothetical questions arise, what if we lost everything? They are no longer tests but genuine conversations about resilience, and perhaps that is the true lesson beneath all of it, that wealth, whether vast or modest, amplifies whatever insecurities already exist, turning small doubts into elaborate experiments, yet it cannot substitute for the simple courage of telling the truth at the beginning. I don't regret marrying Daniel, and he doesn't regret marrying me, but we both acknowledge that love built on evaluation rather than openness is fragile. And if there is any advice hidden in our story, it is this: if you find yourself tempted to test the person you care about, ask whether the answer you're seeking is worth the distance the test will create. Because sometimes the bravest move isn't protecting your assets or guarding your pride, but risking transparency before suspicion has a chance to write its own narrative.